The sun had barely risen over the massive refinery towers when Daniel Carter stood outside the steel gates. Pipelines stretched across the horizon like metallic rivers, flames danced from flare stacks, tankers groaned in the distance. This was the world of oil and gas, and Daniel was just an intern. He had no connections, no powerful uncle, no family in the industry, just a worn backpack, and a notebook filled with questions. The security guard glanced at his badge. First day? Daniel nodded. The guard smirked. Let me tell you something, young man. Interns come here every year. Most disappear before the end of the program. Daniel smiled politely, but inside he whispered something to himself. Not me. Inside the training hall sat 20 interns, among them were Michael Chen, a top engineering graduate, Aisha Rahman, brilliant and confident, Carlos Mendez, the son of a senior drilling contractor, and then there was Daniel, quiet, observing, listening. The orientation leader walked in, Richard Wallace, a veteran operations manager with more than 30 years in the industry. He looked at the room and spoke slowly. In oil and gas, mistakes cost millions. Sometimes they cost lives. The room fell silent. Then he added something Daniel would never forget. Only the disciplined survive here. Daniel wrote every word down. Daniel was assigned to the maintenance department. His supervisor was Mark Thompson. Mark barely looked at him. You're the intern? Yes, sir. Mark handed him a clipboard. Inspect these valves. Daniel looked down at the list. 120 valves, spread across a refinery the size of a small city. Another intern leaned toward him and whispered quietly, don't worry. Nobody finishes that list. But Daniel didn't complain. He simply started walking, step by step, valve by valve, under the burning sun. Steel pipes radiated heat, machines roared around him, workers moved quickly between units. At lunch break some technicians noticed him writing notes. One worker laughed. Look at the intern trying too hard. Another joked loudly, relax kid. You're not becoming the CEO. The room burst into laughter, but Daniel didn't argue. He didn't react. He simply kept eating, and kept writing, because Daniel had begun to notice something others ignored. Every pipe had a rhythm, every machine had a sound, every system had patterns. He studied the refinery like a puzzle. 3 weeks later something caught Daniel's attention, a pressure gauge. The needle moved slightly, back and forth, tiny fluctuations. Barely visible, but something felt wrong. Daniel walked to his supervisor. Sir, this pump pressure pattern seems unusual. Mark frowned. You're an intern. Focus on your checklist. Daniel nodded and walked away, but he kept observing the gauge, day after day. Finally he gathered the courage to speak again. Sir, if I'm wrong I accept it. But I think the pump seal may fail soon. Mark sighed, but eventually ordered a quick inspection. The engineers opened the pump housing. Everyone looked inside. Silence. Then one technician spoke. Seal damage. Early stage. If the pump had failed, the shutdown could have cost the company millions. Mark looked at Daniel differently now. For the first time, good catch. Before we continue Daniel's journey, if stories like this inspire you to work harder, think smarter, and build real mastery, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Because on this channel we reveal the hidden psychology of success, discipline, opportunity, and human behavior that most people never talk about. Now let's continue the story. Not everyone was happy about Daniel's progress. Some fellow interns started whispering, he's just lucky. One of them, Brian Cole, mocked him openly. You think you're smarter than everyone? Daniel never responded. Instead he kept learning. At night he studied equipment manuals, pipeline diagrams, the flow systems, pump mechanics. He even studied the history of legendary industrial leaders like. Daniel realized something powerful. Mastery is not talent, mastery is repetition. 6 months later Daniel was still an intern, but now people had begun to notice his work ethic. One night during the shift something unexpected happened. An alarm sounded across the control room. A compressor system malfunctioned. Operators rushed to their screens. Supervisor Mark shouted commands. Pressure is rising. The room became tense. If the compressor failed the refinery could shut down for days. Daniel stared at the screens. Suddenly something clicked. He remembered a section from a manual he studied the week before. He spoke carefully. Sir, if we open the secondary bypass and reduce the load slowly, we might stabilize the system. Mark hesitated, but the control room operators tried the adjustment. Slowly, very slowly, the pressure stopped climbing. Then it began to drop. Crisis avoided. Mark looked at Daniel. You've been studying. Daniel nodded. Every night. The promotion. At the end of the internship program, most interns were preparing to leave. Daniel received a message. Operations manager Richard Wallace wanted to see him. Daniel sat quietly in the office. Richard folded his hands and looked at him. We've been watching your work. Daniel waited. You observe everything. You study everything. Richard leaned forward. Would you like to join us as a junior operations engineer? Daniel felt his heart racing. The intern who started with nothing had become an employee, but this was only the beginning. Years passed. Daniel continued doing what others refused to do, learning, improving, solving difficult problems. Slowly he moved up, engineer, senior engineer, then supervisor. The refinery had learned something important. Daniel understood the system better than anyone. Leadership. 15 years after his first day, Daniel Carter walked through the same refinery gate again, but this time workers greeted him differently. Morning, manager. The quiet intern who once inspected valves in the heat was now the operations manager, responsible for thousands of workers and millions of barrels of production. Yet Daniel never forgot the intern he once was, standing nervously outside the gate, holding a notebook filled with questions. If Daniel's story proves anything, it's that persistence beats talent when talent quits. If you want more stories about mastery, psychology, discipline, and opportunity, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because the next story might completely change the way you see success. Final lesson. Daniel often tells new interns something simple. Success in this industry isn't about who starts ahead. He points toward the refinery towers. It's about who refuses to stop learning. Because when you master the system eventually rewards you.